I didn't expect anything grand for my 60th birthday. I've never been the kind to demand attention or make a fuss. I thought maybe there'd be a phone call, a quiet message, maybe a small visit. Not because I needed it, just because I thought someone might still think I mattered. But when the day came, it was quiet. Too quiet. I woke up early, just like always, out of habit more than excitement. The house creaked in the same way it always does in the morning. Old wood, older memories. I made myself some tea, sat at the kitchen table, and looked out the window for a long time. There was nothing special about that day. No streamers, no cake, no card in the mailbox. I didn't expect much, but I suppose part of me still hoped. Just a little. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my daughter. A single text. "Don't expect a party. We already did enough raising you." That was it. No happy birthday, no smiley face, just that. I read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure I wasn't misreading something. I wasn't. I stared at the screen for a long time, not quite feeling anything yet. Just empty, like my stomach had quietly dropped without warning. I set the phone down without replying. What was there to say? I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't want to beg for kindness on a day that should have meant something. I just nodded to myself, like I understood something I had always avoided seeing. I got up, poured myself another cup of tea, and sat back down. The chair creaked, and for a moment, that sound felt louder than the silence in the rest of the room. I looked around. The house used to feel full. Toys on the floor, laughter in the halls, her voice yelling for more cereal or asking where her shoes went. Now it was just still. Everything in its place. Nothing out of order. Nothing left to do. I thought about her growing up. The birthday parties I organized with balloons and scavenger hunts. The nights I stayed up late sewing costumes or fixing school projects she forgot to mention until bedtime. The mornings I packed her lunch while trying to get to work on time. I gave everything I had, and some things I didn't. And I never kept score. Not once. But now I wondered if that was the mistake. That maybe in giving so much, I taught her I'd always be there to give more. That my presence was a default, not a gift. That no matter how she spoke to me, I'd stay. On that birthday morning, something shifted in me. Not a loud, angry thing. Not some vengeful declaration. Just a quiet fold of something deep inside. Like a curtain slowly being drawn. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel much. Just a strange calm. Like I was finally seeing things clearly for the first time. I thought about the wedding. 3 weeks away. I'd paid for almost all of it. Not because I was asked to. Because I offered. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be a moment we could share. That I could stand quietly in the background and watch her smile and feel like I had helped build something good. The venue, the food, the decor, the deposit on her dress. Every detail, quietly taken care of. She never thanked me. Not directly. She just forwarded invoices and links and said things like, "They need it by Friday." I handled it. And I smiled while doing it. Because I thought that's what a parent does. But on that birthday, after reading that message, I started to realize maybe it wasn't kindness she saw in me. Maybe it was weakness. Maybe I'd made it too easy to be forgotten. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't send a follow-up. I went for a walk instead. Past the bakery where I used to buy her favorite strawberry tart. Past the bookstore where we spent Sunday afternoons reading side by side. Past the little playground with the rusted swing set where she once fell and scraped her knee. And I carried her all the way home without once putting her down. The city hadn't changed much. But I had. And maybe she had too. I started thinking about what would happen if I didn't show up to the wedding. Would she even notice? Or would she just say, "Good, one less thing to manage"? I knew what the answer used to be, but now I wasn't sure. I got back home and sat on the couch. The television was still on from earlier, some rerun talking over itself in the background. I didn't hear a word of it. I just sat there, still in my coat, still holding my phone, still thinking about that message. "We already did enough raising you." That sentence played over and over in my head. Like I was some obligation that had overstayed its welcome. Like I was a project someone resented completing. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. But I loved her. Fiercely. Quietly. Constantly. And now, on the one day where I allowed myself to be seen, she told me not to expect anything. And I didn't. Not anymore. But I also realized something else that day. Maybe she thought she was cutting me off with that message. Maybe she thought she had the final word. But I knew something she didn't. Something I had quietly handled and filed and signed and deposited. I had paid for every single piece of her wedding. My name was on every agreement, every check, every confirmation. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped giving things to people who saw me as disposable. That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't toss and turn. I just stared at the ceiling in the dark, feeling the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm. Not the kind that tears things apart. The kind that clears the air. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was just done waiting to be treated like I mattered. Done hoping someone would remember I existed beyond what I could pay for. I decided I'd give her what she asked for. No more presents. No more face. No more quiet. Yes. Just silence. But I also knew one more thing. The wedding venue would be calling me soon. And this time, I'd pick up. But I wouldn't say what they expected. The next morning felt no different, except for how quiet everything inside me had become. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't check my phone. I just sat at the kitchen table again, this time with the light off, watching the reflection of the gray sky in the window. Thought about how many birthdays had passed in this house, how many years I'd lived waiting for moments to be meaningful, only to realize that some people never return the weight you carry for them. I used to think love was about showing up, no matter what. That consistency was the greatest gift you could give someone. That if you kept saying yes to the pickups, the payments, the late-night phone calls, the wedding budgets, eventually, they'd understand what that meant. But that morning, I realized maybe the problem wasn't that they didn't understand. Maybe the problem was that they did, and simply didn't care. It wasn't malice, it was indifference. And sometimes, that cuts deeper than cruelty. I poured myself a glass of water and took one slow sip, just to feel something physical. My body still moved out of habit, even if my mind didn't know where it was going. The chair beneath me felt harder than usual. The house felt colder. I wasn't sad, not anymore. I was adjusting. My world had quietly shifted, and now I was watching it from outside the glass. At around 11:30, the phone finally rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was. I let it ring once, then twice. Then I picked up, my voice steady. "This is Mr. Whitmore," I said. There was a cheerful woman on the other end, bright and efficient, asking to confirm final details for the upcoming wedding at the Riverpoint Estate venue. I listened. She listed the florist, the menu selections, the chair count. She asked if I was still the primary contact for billing. "I am," I said. She asked if I'd like to finalize the remaining payment that afternoon or if I preferred to do it on the due date next week. I was quiet for a moment, then I said, "I'd like to cancel everything." Silence. It was the kind of pause you only hear in a room where someone has just dropped a glass. "Sir, I'm sorry, did you say?" I repeated it. Cancel everything. The event, the contract, all of it. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shuffling through papers, checking something on her screen. "Mr. Whitmore, we've already begun preparations," she said gently. "The deposit is non-refundable." I nodded to myself. "I understand. That was a gift. The rest is not." She tried to clarify, maybe thinking it was a mistake, maybe assuming there'd been a family emergency. I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I thanked her for her time, told her to send a cancellation confirmation to my email, and hung up. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. It felt like turning off a light in a room I no longer needed to enter. That afternoon, I received 3 missed calls. One from the wedding planner, one from the caterer, one from my daughter. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't even listen to the voicemails. I just watched the notifications pile up quietly at the top of my screen like dust on an unused table. She texted later that night, "Why aren't you responding?" The venue just called me in a panic. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. But I didn't type anything. I just let it sit there, like her birthday message had sat with me. A mirror, finally held up. For once, she could wait. The next morning, I opened the window and let the cold air in. It bit at my skin, but I didn't mind. It made me feel more awake than I had in months. I stood there for a long time, breathing in and out, as if every inhale was a reminder that I was still here, and every exhale was a small release of everything I had carried without thanks. My phone buzzed again. She'd sent another message. "Please tell me you didn't actually cancel it. That venue was everything. The date's already on the invites. What is going on?" I still said nothing. I thought about how often I'd dropped everything for her, changed plans, emptied savings, put myself last, and how often she'd treated my presence as an obligation, a given, not a choice. There was no, "Dad, I love you." No, "I'm sorry about the birthday." No recognition of anything beyond her panic. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry I was hurt. She was sorry her plan had a crack in it. That evening, I opened a small drawer in the hallway. Inside was a folder labeled "Wedding." Neatly filed receipts, vendor agreements, timeline spreadsheets I had once studied like scripture to make sure nothing went wrong. I took the folder out, sat down at the table, and looked through it slowly. Not out of regret, just to see it one last time before I let it go. Then I picked up the phone, called the bank, and canceled the remaining transactions. Quietly, without anger, just finality. It was like closing the back cover of a book you already knew the ending to. A week passed. The phone calls slowed. The messages got shorter. Then one night, she called again, and I finally answered. Her voice was sharp, full of frustration and disbelief. "Why would you do this to me?" she asked. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I said nothing for a few seconds. Then I replied, "You asked for the best gift I could give you, so I disappeared." She didn't respond right away. I could feel her searching for a response, something to throw back. But silence has a weight, and that night, I let it sit. Finally, I said, "You told me you'd already done enough raising me. So I stopped asking to be raised. You raised me into silence. I'm simply honoring that." The call ended not long after. She didn't apologize. She didn't scream. Just hung up. And I let her go. That night, I slept without interruption. No spinning thoughts. No mental rewinds. Just stillness. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally stood up for myself. Not with anger, not with punishment, but with absence. The kind of absence that echoes. The days that followed weren't dramatic. They were just quiet. A kind of silence I had never truly known before. Not the absence of noise, the absence of expectation. I no longer waited for texts. I didn't check emails hoping for a change of heart. I stopped hovering near my phone like some uninvited guest waiting to be noticed. Instead, I moved through my house like it had finally become mine again. I took out the trash without rushing. I fixed the cabinet door that had been loose for 3 years. I bought groceries and let myself buy the brand of coffee I used to drink before switching to the one she liked. The world hadn't changed, but something in me had shifted just enough that I no longer felt like I was orbiting someone else's sun. I was no longer trying to stay warm by someone else's fire. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was a decision. A decision to reclaim my space, my time, and my dignity. For so many years, I had measured my worth by how useful I could be to other people. How quickly I responded, how often I gave, how much I sacrificed without being asked. I thought that's what love looked like. But now, standing in the stillness of my kitchen, I was starting to understand that love without respect is just servitude with a smile. I remembered the way she had looked at me on my birthday. Not with cruelty, but with condescension. As if I were the burden she'd carried instead of the man who'd carried her. And I began to wonder if all those times I'd shown up, all those times I'd paid, comforted, or solved her problems, I had been feeding a version of love that didn't require her to see me as human, just as useful, reliable, quiet, replaceable. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. In. Outside, again and again. The strange part was how freeing it felt. People think heartbreak is loud. It isn't. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stop chasing an apology that will never come. And that's what I did. I stopped. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market for the first time in years. I walked alone. I bought a small bag of plums and a loaf of bread. No one asked me where I'd been or who I was buying for. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. I sat on a bench under a tree, pulled a plum from the bag, and bit into it slowly. It was soft, sweet, and messy. The juice ran down my fingers, and I laughed, actually laughed, at how unfamiliar that moment felt. To be alone and still feel full. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd enjoyed something without looking over my shoulder for approval. That night, she called again. I saw the name flash across the screen and let it ring. I stared at the phone while it vibrated, knowing that somewhere on the other end was a storm brewing. Not because I was gone, but because she could no longer rely on my silence. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she wanted. I could already hear the words before they were spoken. You're ruining everything. I can't believe you'd do this to me. This is the most important day of my life. But here's what I've learned. People who only call you when they need something rarely ask how you are. They ask where you've gone, because they never noticed you were drowning while they stood safely on shore. So I let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail this time, just silence. 2 days later, her fiancé called. I hadn't expected that. His voice was calm, almost diplomatic. Mr. Whitmore, I just wanted to check in. I heard about the venue cancellation, and I was hoping we could talk about it. Maybe there was a misunderstanding? I almost respected his tone. Polite, measured. As if I was a business associate, not the father of the woman he planned to marry. I listened. He kept speaking. Something about rescheduling, alternate funding, compromise. And then he said something that snapped the air in the room. I know she hurt your feelings with what she said, but this is a really big moment for her. Surely you don't want to ruin it over a comment she didn't mean. That sentence sat with me like a nail through the floorboard. I let him finish. I waited. Then I said, slowly, clearly, when someone tells you how they feel about you, believe them. I did, and I'm acting accordingly. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, that's fair. And hung up. No threats. No pleas. Just silence. Maybe he understood more than she did. Or maybe he saw the writing on the wall. Either way, I didn't hear from him again. The following morning, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside, in my daughter's handwriting, were 6 words. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. No punctuation, no explanation, no warmth. Just a sentence that felt more like damage control than remorse. I placed the card on the counter and left it there. It stayed untouched for 3 days. Then one afternoon, I picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in the back of my desk drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a record. Proof that she had at least acknowledged what she'd said. Even if she hadn't taken responsibility. That weekend, my neighbor stopped by. An older man named Greg. We'd exchanged nods over the years, but never much more. He brought over a bottle of wine. Heard it was your birthday last week, he said. I smiled, surprised. It was. He didn't ask why there hadn't been a party. He didn't ask where my family was. He just poured 2 glasses and said, 60's not so bad. Cheers. And we drank. No toasts. No speeches. Just 2 men, sitting quietly in the late afternoon sun, letting the wind pass through the fence without needing to fill it with words. I realized then that some connections don't have to be lifelong to feel real. Sometimes the kindness of a near stranger is worth more than the approval of the people you've sacrificed for your entire life. And I held on to that. The next Monday morning felt like any other, and that was the strange part. For years, I'd woken up carrying the weight of someone else's expectations before I even put my feet on the ground. Whether it was making sure she had what she needed, checking bank notifications to see if another transfer had gone through, or wondering what mood she'd be in based on the text I hadn't received yet. My days had started with her, even when I wasn't part of her world. But this morning, I got up, brewed my coffee, and for the first time in decades, I felt the air in my lungs without wondering if someone would be disappointed in me before noon. I sat at the kitchen table with the sun warming my shoulder through the window, and I didn't rush. I didn't check messages. I didn't search for her name out of reflex. I just sat there, breathing, existing. And that small, quiet moment felt bigger than any birthday celebration I never got. But right when I started to believe I was settling into peace, the wedding planner called. Not my daughter, not her fiancé, not even someone from the venue. No, the planner. A woman I'd met once, briefly, months ago. Her voice was overly sweet, as if she'd been coached to soften the blow. "Hi, Mr. Whitmore. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Just checking in about the payment schedule. There's been some confusion, and I wanted to make sure we're still on track since the big day is coming up fast." Her tone grated against me, chirpy, transactional, the kind of voice people use when they're used to getting their way. I let her finish her pre-written pitch before calmly responding, "I'm not funding the wedding anymore. Please remove my name from any documents moving forward." There was a pause. A long one. Then a stammer. "Oh, well, I thought that had been arranged. Your daughter told us you'd handle the venue and catering directly?" I cut her off. Not harshly, but firmly. Plans change. Then I hung up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. There's a difference between making peace and pretending nothing happened. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't revenge. It was me choosing not to bankroll disrespect. I sat there, phone still warm in my hand, and felt the kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. That's when my sister called. We rarely spoke, not because of distance, but because family dynamics had a way of stretching small hurts into lifelong silences. She had heard from someone who heard from someone that I'd canceled the payment. "Are you okay?" she asked cautiously. "I heard you pulled out of the wedding." I waited before answering, then said, "I'm tired of pretending I wasn't hurt." She didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just let the line go quiet in a way that felt like someone finally saw me. "She's going to be furious," she said eventually. "I know," I replied. "Do you care?" "Not anymore." That was the truth. Not the angry kind, the exhausted kind. The kind that comes after years of watching someone take pieces of you like post-it notes off a board. Easy to remove, easy to forget. That night, I got an email from my daughter. Not a call, not a visit, an email. The subject line said, "We need to talk." I opened it slowly, like peeling back a bandage you know is stuck to something tender. The message inside wasn't long, just a few cold sentences wrapped in faux politeness. "Dad, I was shocked to hear you canceled the payment. This is extremely embarrassing and puts me in a terrible position. I've invited 150 people. The venue needs to be paid. You committed to this and now you're backing out with no explanation? I really hope you reconsider, or this is going to damage our relationship permanently." No apology, no acknowledgement, just pressure. Guilt dressed up as formality. And that was the moment it all clicked. She didn't see me as her father. Not in any real way. I was a transaction, a budget line, a problem solver with a wallet. And when that utility stopped, the relationship stopped with it. That's not love. That's convenience. I closed the laptop and stared at the dark screen for a long time, seeing my own reflection and barely recognizing the man looking back. How many years had I shaved off my life trying to stay relevant in a family that only valued what I could provide? I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent alone, all the times I'd sent her money without a thank you, all the ways I'd let her rewrite our history to suit her own comfort. And for what? So she could tell me, on my 60th birthday, that she'd already done enough by raising me? So she could send a cold email that threatened to cut me off because I dared to say no? I stood up, walked outside, and let the night air hit my face. It was cool, honest, and didn't ask anything from me. I looked up at the stars, those same indifferent lights that had hung above me through every version of my life. As a young father, a tired worker, a man who gave more than he got. And I realized something important. I hadn't just canceled a payment. I'd ended a contract I never agreed to. A contract that said my value was conditional. A contract that said I had to buy my place in my daughter's life over and over again, with no end in sight. That night, I slept without waking. No dreams, no guilt, just rest. And in the morning, I woke up lighter. I made a small breakfast. I played a jazz record I hadn't touched in years. I even opened the window to let the breeze in. For once, the air didn't feel like a reminder of what was missing. It felt like a new beginning, the kind where you don't have to prove anything to anyone just to feel like you belong in your own life. And I clung to that. Because while she might still be furious, still spinning the story to make herself the victim, I had already walked off the stage. I wasn't part of that show anymore. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By midweek, the group chat, the one I was still in but never spoke in, lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. First, it was her maid of honor. "Can someone please explain what's going on with the venue? They said the payment bounced or something?" Then one of her fiancé's cousins chimed in, asking if the rehearsal dinner was still happening. Silence from my daughter. Not a single reply. But I could imagine her face. That tight, panicked smile she always used when she thought she could fix something with charm. That slightly higher voice she slipped into when lying through her teeth. I knew all her tells. I'd studied them like a second language. But instead of stepping in, I sat back and watched. It wasn't out of malice. I wasn't rooting for disaster. I just knew, for the first time in my life, it wasn't my job to hold everything together for someone who wouldn't even hold a door open for me. And that thought, as sad as it was, came with a strange peace. That night, she finally called. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I was doing. Just, "Why are you trying to ruin my life?" No hello, no preamble. Just that. Full force, no hesitation. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there, heavy and thick, until she filled it again. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? People are talking. They think I'm some kind of spoiled brat who can't pay for her own wedding. You know I was counting on you. I told everyone you'd cover it. Why would you embarrass me like this?" I kept my voice calm, because someone had to. "You embarrassed yourself the moment you decided my birthday wasn't worth a card, but your wedding was worth thousands." She scoffed. "Oh my God, this is about your birthday? Are you serious right now?" And that's when it hit me. She really didn't get it. Not even a little. It was never about the cake or the candles or the lack of decorations. It was about being treated like a burden when all I'd ever tried to be was present. She kept talking, fast and defensive. "You always do this. Make everything about you. It's my wedding, not yours. Why do you have to make a scene just because you feel left out?" I could hear her unraveling, and in that moment, I realized how many years I'd spent letting her rewrite reality. Letting her twist things, so I always ended up the villain for wanting basic human decency. I'd sat through so many of these conversations in the past, giving in, making peace, writing checks, just to keep her world spinning smoothly. But not this time. I let her rant until she ran out of breath. Then I said one sentence. I didn't cancel the wedding. I just canceled my participation in the lie. She didn't reply, just hung up. For days, there was silence. Not just from her, but from everyone. I became a ghost in my own family, not because I disappeared, but because I finally stopped shouting to be seen. And in that silence, I started to remember things I'd buried under the noise of constant disappointment. Like the way she used to smile when she was 5 and held my hand at the park. Like the birthday she forgot in college because she was so busy. And the way I still mailed her a care package that same week. Like the time I paid off her credit card debt without her asking, and she told her friends she handled it on her own. I remembered every little cut she delivered with a thankless tongue and a proud posture. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was death by 1,000 erasures. My love had always been unconditional, but her respect had always been rented, and I was tired of paying the lease. I started getting phone calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. What happened? Why would you ruin this for her? Couldn't you have handled this privately? I didn't explain myself. Not to them. Not anymore. Because explaining yourself only works when the people listening actually want to understand you. And most of them were just looking for someone to blame so they didn't have to question the Golden Girls version of events. One aunt, my late wife's sister, called and said, "I know you're hurt, but But think of how this makes her look. That was the moment I finally laughed. Not bitter, not cruel, just tired. That's all she's ever cared about, I said. How things look, not how they feel. The aunt hung up without a word. And that was fine by me, because I had finally stopped being the family's safety net. Let someone else catch the fall this time, if anyone even tried. Days turned into a week, and then another. The wedding loomed closer, and still, no apology, no self-reflection, just silence and tension, like a storm circling a house too proud to board its windows. But what they didn't know, what she didn't know, was that I had been building my escape quietly, brick by emotional brick. Not out of revenge, not even out of sadness, but because I finally saw the truth. Some people will love you as long as you're useful, and the moment you ask to be treated like a person, they'll call you selfish. I wasn't selfish. I was empty. And I was done pretending that being drained was the same thing as being loved. I thought about writing her a letter, a final explanation, a list of all the birthdays missed, the favors forgotten, the years of invisible fatherhood. But then I realized she already knew. Deep down, she knew. She just didn't care. Or maybe she didn't know how to care. Either way, my words wouldn't fix what her choices had already broken. So I didn't write the letter. I didn't call. I didn't beg to be included again. I just waited. And when the storm finally arrived, it didn't look like thunder. It looked like a phone call from the wedding venue. I didn't say anything after that conversation with her. I just stopped expecting anything. From her, from anyone. My birthday passed, and I sat alone with a store-bought cupcake and one flickering candle that I lit myself. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because I couldn't bear the silence anymore. The house was too quiet. There were no messages, no calls, no accidental reminders that I even existed. Just the sound of a refrigerator humming in the background, a chair creaking when I shifted my weight, and the little flame that trembled with every breath I took. I didn't make a wish. I didn't blow it out. I just watched it burn down until the wax melted into the frosting. That was the first time I realized how small I had become in their lives. Not even forgotten. Worse than that. I had become invisible. A relic. An obligation they thought they had already fulfilled. They had done enough raising me, after all. That line echoed in my ears like a curse. The irony was cruel. I had given her everything. Every opportunity. Every sleepless night. Every ounce of patience I didn't even know I had. I was there for her first day of school, the nightmares, the heartbreaks, the college rejections and acceptances. I held her hand through all of it. And now, she couldn't even bother to pretend I mattered. I wasn't hurt because I was excluded from a birthday. I was hurt because she meant it. That line wasn't just thoughtless. It was truth. It had come from somewhere deep inside her. Somewhere that had already decided I didn't need love anymore. That I was something she could discard now that I wasn't useful. I went back to my routines after that. Cooked for one. Cleaned the same surfaces. Folded laundry that didn't matter if it was wrinkled. The days blurred into each other, and I kept pretending I was okay with it. Because if I let myself stop pretending, I was scared of what I'd feel. Or worse, what I wouldn't. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor. Just when I started believing that nothing else could surprise me, the phone rang. It was the wedding venue, a cheerful voice confirming the final deposit for her big day. "Just making sure we're good to go," the woman chirped. "The father of the bride usually takes care of this part. Do you want us to use the same card from the engagement dinner?" And for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The engagement dinner. The one I had quietly paid for, without being asked, without being thanked. Because I thought, maybe, that would be the gesture that would remind her I was still here, that I still loved her. And now I was expected to pay for the wedding too. After everything. After she had looked me in the eye and said I wasn't worth celebrating. My hands were shaking. Not with anger, but with something colder. Something deeper. Not a flare-up, a freeze. Like something inside me had snapped clean without sound. I didn't answer the venue lady right away. I just stared at the floor, thinking of all the ways I had made space for her happiness while she made none for mine. Thinking of how many times I had chosen silence over confrontation, just to keep the peace. Just to stay in her life in whatever small way I could. And suddenly, that felt pathetic. Suddenly, I didn't want to be a ghost at her wedding. I didn't want to sit in the corner like some uninvited burden who paid his way into the photos. I wanted to disappear, not to punish her, but to free myself. And so, very quietly, I said, "No. Cancel everything." The woman on the phone stammered, unsure if I was joking. I repeated it, clearer this time, and I hung up. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, hands folded, and waited for the explosion. I thought the fallout would be immediate. I expected my phone to ring within minutes. Her voice, shrill and furious, demanding to know what I meant by cancel everything. But the phone stayed silent. I kept glancing at it, every vibration that never came, every second that stretched longer than it should. By the second hour, I started to wonder if they even noticed. Maybe they hadn't called yet because someone else was footing the bill. Maybe the venue thought I was bluffing and called her instead. Or maybe, and this was the part that stung, maybe she didn't care. Maybe she had expected me to vanish. After all, wasn't that what she asked for on my birthday? The best gift would be if I never showed my face again. So maybe, in some twisted way, I had just granted her wish. And the silence? That was her thank you. It sounds pathetic now, but I checked my messages every hour that night. I stayed awake with the light on, staring at the crack in the ceiling, listening for anything that might sound like regret. But the house was dead quiet. No knock at the door, no call, not even a text. And slowly, I began to realize something about our entire relationship, something I hadn't let myself admit until that moment. I had always been the one holding the thread. I had always been the one initiating, reminding, giving, forgiving, reaching. I had been the anchor, not because I was stronger, but because I couldn't bear the idea of losing her. And she knew that. She knew I would always be there, always say yes, always pick up. Even after she hurt me. Even when she ignored me. Even when she humiliated me. She knew I would never walk away. Until now. That one word, cancel, had done something no argument or years of neglect ever could. It had shifted the weight. It had placed the silence in her lap. And she didn't know what to do with it. Days passed. 5, then 7. Still nothing. The venue hadn't called back, which meant she knew. She had to know. And still, no contact, no confrontation, no apology. She had ghosted me. Her own father. After I had paid for her education, her apartment, her engagement. After I had swallowed every insult just to be near her. After I had smiled through every time she looked through me like I was furniture. I told myself I didn't care, that I was free now, that the silence was peace, not punishment. But that was a lie, because I did care, and I hated that I cared. I hated how my chest still tightened every time my phone lit up, hoping it was her. I hated how I still remembered her laugh as a child, the way she used to cling to my hand crossing the street. I hated that even now, when she treated me like nothing, I still loved her like everything. And I hated that I didn't know how to stop. I started avoiding the places we used to go together. I couldn't walk past the park bench where she used to swing her legs and tell me about her day. I changed the radio station when songs she used to sing came on. I stopped going to the grocery store on Sundays. That was her favorite day to surprise me with a visit, back when visits still happened. I thought distance would make it easier, that the more time passed, the less it would sting. But grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it just sits with you, in your chair, in your hallway, in the space between meals, and waits for you to acknowledge it. And when you don't, it doesn't leave. It just grows heavier. I started dreaming about her. Not nightmares. Not arguments. Just dreams where we were sitting at a table, laughing. Where she called me dad like she used to. Where she looked at me with something other than indifference. I'd wake up with tears on my pillow, ashamed of how badly I wanted the dream to be real. How badly I still hoped for something that was already broken. I told no one about what happened. Not my sister, not my neighbor, not even the man at the hardware store who used to ask how the bride-to-be was doing. I let the world assume everything was fine, because somehow, admitting the truth, that my daughter had discarded me, felt like confessing to a failure I hadn't recovered from. It wasn't just the wedding that had been canceled. It was my role, my relevance, my place in the story. I wasn't the proud father of the bride. I was just a forgotten name on a contract, a bank account with legs. I couldn't even blame the groom. I barely knew him. He had always been polite, distant. I wondered if he knew what she had said to me on my birthday. If he knew what kind of woman he was marrying. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he kept his distance. Maybe he had seen the way she treated people she didn't need anymore. Maybe I wasn't her first casualty. Or maybe I was just the only one who stayed. Until now. But still, I waited. I don't know why. Some part of me still hoped for a knock at the door. A letter. A voicemail. Anything. But all I got was silence, and the sound of time folding in on itself. It was the 9th day of silence when the wedding venue called me again. Not to reconfirm, not to scold me, but to ask if I was absolutely certain about the cancellation. I asked why they were calling again. The woman on the other end hesitated. I could hear her shuffling papers, trying to sound neutral, but the truth spilled out anyway. Because the bride and her mother just came in. They assumed the payment was already processed. I paused. Her mother. My ex-wife. Of course. I shouldn't have been surprised. They were always aligned when it came to taking, but never when it came to giving. The venue manager sounded nervous now, like she realized she had said too much. They were upset when we told them the invoice wasn't finalized, she added. I let her squirm for a few seconds before I calmly said, "Yes, I'm certain. Cancel everything." Then I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel weak. That same evening, it happened. A knock at the door. I stood still in the hallway, staring at the wood grain like it was alive. My chest tightened. Then it came again, louder this time. I opened it. There she was. My daughter. Wedding hair already done, mascara smeared, eyes swollen with disbelief and fury. She didn't even say hello. She pushed past me into the hallway, leaving the door open behind her. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped. "Why would you do that?" I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind her and turned slowly. She was pacing now, her hands flailing, her white satin robe fluttering behind her. "Do you know what you've done? The venue won't give us the date back. Do you have any idea what people are going to say? What his family is going to think?" Her voice cracked on that last word. Family. I tilted my head. Funny. That word. Coming from you. She froze. Just for a second. Then her eyes narrowed. "Don't make this about feelings, Dad. This was business. You agreed to pay." I almost laughed. Business. That's what I had become to her. An ATM with a pulse. I stepped closer, not menacingly, but with the gravity of someone who had finally woken up. "You remember what you said to me on my 60th birthday?" Her face twitched. "I was stressed. You know I didn't mean—" "You said," I interrupted, "that the best gift I could give you was never showing my face again. So I did. I gave you your gift. I disappeared." Her mouth opened, then closed. She was losing control, and she knew it. "It was your responsibility to pay," she snapped. "You promised." I raised an eyebrow. "And what was your responsibility? To love me only when the check cleared?" Her breath hitched. She wasn't used to me talking like this. I had always been soft, always apologizing for things I didn't do, always absorbing her sharpness so she wouldn't have to see her own reflection. But not today. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she whispered. "No," I replied, calm as stone. "You embarrassed yourself when you forgot how to treat the people who built your life. I gave you everything. And on the one day that was supposed to celebrate me, you told me I was disposable, so I disposed of my wallet." The silence that followed was thick with something unspoken. Not hate, not even regret, but the slow dawning realization that she couldn't undo this. She had played a game she thought she'd always win. And for the first time, the dealer folded. "You ruined my wedding," she said finally, almost like a child. But I shook my head. No, sweetheart. You did that. The moment you thought money was more important than respect. The moment you treated me like a nuisance instead of a father. That was the real cancellation. She stood there in stunned silence. I saw the tears start to well again. Not from sorrow, but from the panic of losing control. For once, she wasn't the one making the rules. For once, I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't, and it hadn't been for years. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. What am I supposed to tell everyone? I looked her straight in the eyes. Tell them the truth, that your father finally kept a promise, just not the one you expected. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. Just the sound of quiet realization. And then she was gone. I stood alone in the hallway, the smell of her perfume still lingering. The silence returned, but it felt different now. Not heavy, not sad, just clean. The kind of silence that follows truth. The kind that signals something is finally over. Not with a bang, not with applause, but with the soft, steady heartbeat of dignity. I walked into the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. I had missed this view. For years I'd been staring at it but never seeing it. Always distracted, always trying to earn love I had already paid for 100 times over. Now, for the first time, it felt like mine again. She might never come back. She might tell people I was cruel, that I sabotaged her wedding out of spite. But I didn't care anymore. Because sometimes, the greatest gift isn't presence, it's absence. The absence of guilt. The absence of debt. The absence of begging someone to see your worth. I had shown up for her every time. And when she finally asked me not to, I listened. I listened so well, it changed everything. The days that followed weren't loud. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic phone calls, no flying accusations, just quiet. I didn't expect her to come back and apologize. I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't check social media to see if her wedding photos had been posted anyway. I didn't want to know. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much for too long, and it had worn me down to something I no longer recognized. And now, with the silence, I had space to breathe. I spent those days doing small things I had forgotten how to enjoy. I repotted the dusty plant by the kitchen window. I replaced the light bulb in the hallway that had flickered for 2 months. I sorted old receipts, old letters, and found a birthday card she had written me when she was 10, still folded neatly, the ink a little faded. To the best dad in the world. I stared at it for a long time. Not with tears, not with regret, but with this quiet ache that comes from watching someone you love vanish in slow motion over the years. It hadn't happened all at once. That would have been easier. No, this was gradual. Little things. Her forgetting my birthday once, then twice. Her asking for money without even saying please. Her rolling her eyes when I reminded her about her mother's lies. And worst of all, the way she looked at me. Like I was her backup plan, her emotional storage unit. Always there. Always full. Always ready to be emptied when needed. I didn't blame her for everything. Maybe I had given too much. Maybe I had trained her to believe I would never say no. I gave her so much of me that I forgot to leave anything for myself. But the moment she said I should disappear, that was the final needle. Not a sword, just a needle. Sharp, precise, and unforgettable. I didn't attend the postponed wedding, if it even happened. Her mother never called either. That didn't surprise me. They'd always shared a skill, rewriting history in their favor. I imagined them telling everyone I was unstable, dramatic, unreliable. That I sabotaged her day out of jealousy or ego. And maybe some people would believe that, but the people who knew me, truly knew me, wouldn't. They'd know how I used to cancel work meetings just to pick her up from school when she forgot her violin. They'd remember how I stayed up all night decorating her 16th birthday cake after the bakery canceled last minute. They'd seen me break down once in the grocery store parking lot, holding a tiny dress I bought when she was a toddler, because I remembered how she used to hug me like I was her whole sky. Those memories were mine. Not for her approval, not for anyone's validation. Just mine. In that quiet, I started writing again. Not for publication, just journaling, processing, trying to find the threads between who I was and who I had become. It's strange how much space pain takes up when we don't address it, how it nests in corners, grows roots in silence, and blooms in the dark. I wrote letters I never sent, one to her, one to myself, and even one to the version of me that had spent years believing he didn't deserve boundaries. I sat in the same kitchen every morning, watching the light move across the floor, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting his own home. I felt present. Broken, maybe, but real. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I wasn't bitter. Just clear. She had made a choice. And so had I. Mine was to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer a bandage. A few weeks later, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in familiar handwriting. I opened it cautiously. It was blank inside, except for one sentence. I didn't mean it. I was just hurt. No signature, no apology, no warmth. Just an attempt at scratching the surface of accountability without ever touching it. I put it in a drawer. Not because it meant nothing, but because it didn't mean enough. Healing doesn't require an audience. And closure, I learned, is something you can give yourself. Some days I missed her. Or rather, I missed the version of her I used to know. The little girl who held my hand in crowds. The teenager who cried in my arms after her first heartbreak. The college grad who called me after every job interview. Those pieces of her felt like a different person. Someone I'd lost, even though she still walked the same earth. I had to grieve that version. I had to mourn what I thought our relationship would become. Not with anger, but with honesty. Grief, I realized, isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about the people who are still alive, still breathing, but who've already left in every way that matters. And yet, despite it all, I didn't feel empty. I felt awake. I wasn't trapped anymore in the loop of trying to fix what wouldn't be fixed. I wasn't begging for crumbs. I had stood up. Quietly. Decisively. And there's something powerful in that. In knowing you didn't burn the bridge, but you finally stopped building it alone. That kind of strength doesn't shout. It whispers. It steadies your hands. It lets you exhale. It reminds you that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And so I carried on. One day at a time. With peace that didn't need permission. With dignity she might never understand. But most of all, with the knowledge that I finally gave myself the one thing I had been waiting for others to hand me. Worth. Life didn't change overnight after that. I didn't suddenly become invincible or endlessly wise. I didn't stop thinking about what could have been or replaying some of the words she said that still echoed when the house got too quiet. But slowly, and without fanfare, things started to feel different. Not easier, just clearer. There's a kind of clarity that arrives only after you've been broken by people you love. A sharpness that cuts through illusions you once clung to. I no longer fantasized about what her wedding day would have been like if things had gone differently. I no longer imagined giving a toast that made her cry or dancing with her to that father-daughter song we used to hum when she was a child. I let those dreams go. Not with bitterness, but with grace. Because letting go of what never was is sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves. I began to fill my time differently. I took long walks without needing a destination. I started volunteering at the community library, helping teenagers prepare for college essays and watching as they lit up when they realized their voices mattered. It reminded me that even when one chapter closes in your life, there are still other pages waiting to be written. And more importantly, read. There were moments when I'd hear a laugh that sounded like hers, or smell a perfume that pulled me back to when she was young and used to sit beside me on the couch, legs curled under, asking endless questions about life. Those moments didn't hurt anymore. They just passed through me, like wind through a window that I no longer tried to close. I learned that pain softens when we stop resisting it. And peace, I found, isn't the absence of hurt. It's the acceptance of truth. One afternoon, I was sipping coffee on the porch, watching the world move around me, when a neighbor stopped by with her young son. He handed me a crumpled drawing, a stick figure man beside a big blue heart. "That's you," he said, grinning with a missing front tooth. "Because you help people and you have a kind face." I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the universe has a way of speaking through the mouths of children when we least expect it. I pinned that drawing to my fridge. It's still there. Not as a replacement for the people who left, but as a reminder that kindness, even when it's unseen, has weight and worth. I never spoke publicly about what happened with my daughter. I didn't post about it online. I didn't share it with coworkers or neighbors. Some wounds aren't meant to be explained. Some stories aren't meant to be dissected for applause or sympathy. They just are. They live quietly in the background, shaping the way we see the world and ourselves. But I'm sharing it now, here. Not for pity, not for validation, but because I know someone out there needs to hear this. You are allowed to stop chasing people who keep proving they don't want to be caught. You are allowed to withdraw the love you've been pouring into a well that only echoes back emptiness. You are allowed to be the hero of your own story, even if it means playing the villain in someone else's version. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you real. I didn't ruin her wedding. I didn't seek revenge. I made a decision that aligned with my dignity after being stripped of it one too many times. And if that decision exposed the cracks she tried to paint over, then so be it. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of how they treat others, not out of punishment, but out of honesty. Because actions do echo. And silence, when wielded by someone who has always been the listener, speaks louder than any scream. I don't know if she's married now. I don't know if she ever understood what she said to me on that birthday. And truthfully, I don't need to know. That's the freedom I earned. The peace that came from releasing the need for closure from someone who was never ready to give it. I carry her in a different way now. Not as a daughter I serve, but as a lesson I learned. One that taught me about boundaries, self-worth, and the quiet courage it takes to choose yourself, even when it hurts. And as I close this chapter, I'm not left with emptiness. I'm left with space. Space for new stories, for real connections, for people who don't see me as a burden or a background character, but as a full, breathing, feeling human being. If you've ever been made to feel like your presence was an inconvenience, if you've ever been told that your love came with too many conditions, let this be your reminder. You are not too much. You are not wrong for caring deeply. And you are not weak for walking away. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is not fight back, but simply refuse to stay where you are not valued. So here I am. Older maybe. Wiser, definitely. And finally, at peace. The kind of peace that doesn't require permission. The kind that settles deep in your bones and says, you did your best. You tried. And now, it's okay to rest. It's okay to begin again. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to you, even in the smallest way, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read the comments, and your presence means more than you know. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Revenge Scars. We post stories like this every week, raw, real, and unafraid to explore the pain and beauty of being human. Until next time, stay grounded, stay brave, and never forget your worth.